Welcome to Glowing Success. My name is Heidi and I am your host. This podcast is for beauty entrepreneurs. Join me weekly as we dive into the beauty industry's ins and outs, from business strategies, top-selling services, and taboo topics. I will be interviewing industry leaders with empowering stories and game-changing insights. Let's illuminate your path to success together. Let's jump into this next episode. Welcome back to Glowing Success. Today we are going to be talking about chargebacks and disputes. Now, I have had experience with this, and I'm going to give you some tips and tricks and different ways to avoid this, and we are going to get all into the details. So chargebacks and disputes are basically when a client has said either they don't like the service or they didn't think the service was something or other, or retail or so forth. So, and they're going back to either the company that you go through to process their credit card or their actual credit card company, and they're saying, hey, I want a refund and so forth, right? So let's talk about policies in place, because how you can avoid these chargebacks and disputes, not necessarily disputes, but the actual chargeback and refund itself, is having a policy in place and having paperwork for your client to sign and so forth. So what I would say is you definitely need two different policies, right? So I have a refund policy for my retail and I have a refund policy for my services. So let's kind of talk about the retail side, because that's a little quicker side, and whereas service-based side can be a little bit tricky. So retail, you have a lot of different companies that have their own refund policies. So I know, for instance, I can give you an example of Tend Skin. I used to carry Tend Skin. I don't anymore. It's a good for ingrown hairs and so forth. They have their own refund policy. So they require that anybody who has a wholesale account with them implements this refund policy. So whereas some companies don't have something and you can implement your own. So I will say, do your due diligence, do your research, and make sure the companies that you're carrying through retail don't have their own that you have to implement if you would like to implement your own. So I personally, since I'm a small business, I have a no refund policy on products, just because it's very hard for me. Like, I can't resell that product. So essentially, once I accept a refund, it's a money loss, right? So how do I avoid kind of that interaction being negative? Well, I sometimes will have samples, so that helps a lot. And then I really go over products before I really recommend a client to buy them. So that could be, in their appointment, if you offered a lot of skin services, obviously make sure you're talking about these products, right? And I think this is natural for every service provider, but just a reminder, like, go over those things and really make sure that this is a good choice for that client and you're selling it for that reason. So by the time they do purchase it, maybe you've already experienced with them, right? So maybe you've already applied it to their skin. Maybe you've already talked a lot about it, and this is their second appointment asking questions and so forth. If a client is curious and you're able to do samples, I would highly suggest doing samples. It has, really good margins when it comes to selling retail. Like, yes, you have to spend a little bit of money to purchase samples, but I will say if a client is willing to take a sample sometimes, they're definitely going to be more willing to purchase it in the future. But this will obviously help you avoid chargebacks and refunds in the future, because they were able to try that product at a small, for a small amount of time, especially if they tend to be allergic to things or things like that. Then they're more likely to say, hey, I really like that product, I'm going to buy it, and they're less likely to return it. So those are kind of my two ways of hopefully helping you sell products without a large return rate, and having a zero refund policy. Now let's talk about services. So services, you want to have a policy in place that they're going to sign probably before every appointment, or at least before their first appointment. And everybody is a little different with this. So it depends on how in-depth your refund policy is for services. Now, when I first started my business, I hired an attorney, and then an attorney wrote my policies for me. I have changed those over the years. So if you're able to do that and you have a budget for that, definitely go that route, because it's more precise to what your information is. And you can put in that policy, there's things that legally you can put in there saying, hey, any appointment going forward or something like that. So that can protect you. If you would like a more cost-effective way of doing things and you are not going to go through your insurance, so I will say a lot of insurance companies have forms that you can download and print off or download and use. So check with your insurance company. I know Associated, they have a lot of forms where I can download and use. So that's an option. If you would like to make your own, another cost-effective option is having a membership with Legal Shield. That is something that's offered in my state. It is a monthly membership program and you get offered a lot of different benefits. So some of those benefits can be, they will review a contract for you. They will write a contract, things like that. So look into Legal Shield. I love it. My husband loves it. And we use it for many different reasons with our businesses. So that could be more cost effective. But you want to have a policy in place that really states what your refund policy is, right? So the client either can sign this when they're making their appointment or they can sign this in person. However you want to do that is up to you, and everybody's personal with that. So you will have to decide what works best for your business and your client load. But I will say, I find that if you have a client sign things in person, you can explain things to them. You can kind of look them eye to eye and say, hey, things like that. So I will say that really is up to you. But for me, that works best just because if they have any questions, I can answer them right then. But also it gives the reassurance of hey, that client did read that. I was looking at them. They signed it and so forth, right? So what happens with the chargeback is that client is going to go to your credit card processor or their credit card and say, hey, I didn't want this. So if you have a policy in place and they signed it, when that dispute comes back to you and you are able to go back on your response to it, you are able to place that, say, hey, look they signed this policy, and this policy, this is what it clearly states. So that's a way to protect yourself. Now, that's not saying that you will never avoid a chargeback with that, but because sometimes they're going to have a rightful answer of why they thought that they should get a refund. Right? So every one of these situations is very unique, I will say. But for the most part, if they're just I just want to charge back because let's say they're just a difficult client and this is a way for them to get out of getting charged for services. I don't know. There's definitely ways out there that people have found. This is one way you can avoid that. Now, the last thing I will say is, if you have a difficult client, and one of the things I was reading online and why I kind of came up with this topic today was about firing clients. I'm a true believer in if a client is difficult or is not a good fit for you as a service provider, or they don't want to follow your policies, or they're continuously giving you issues, fire that client as soon as possible. And there's nothing wrong with that because listen, at the end of the day, we are not going to be for everyone, right? And I think that once you kind of realize that and get more comfortable with that, and understand that you are who you are, you're going to attract people who are naturally attracted to you and so forth, you're going to be much happier with the clients that come in and you actually are going to have a good day with. So whereas pushing a relationship or pushing, yourself to accept a client sometimes is really difficult, right? So why not just get rid of that client? You're not a good fit. They're not a good fit for you. So instead of going through all of the stress and all of the turmoil of that, just fire that client. I have a whole nother episode about this. So check back on another episode about this. But firing clients can be very simple. And I just clearly say, when I fire a client, I just say, hey, I really don't think I'm a good service provider for you. I am no longer taking you after this date. And I hope the best for you, and I wish the best for you, or something like that. And it doesn't really have to be very specific. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to hurt their feelings. You don't have to do all the things, because that will definitely encourage somebody to kind of talk back to it. So you're just saying, hey, I just don't think we're a good fit. I don't think I'm ever going to make you truly happy, right? That's essentially what that is saying. And I think that somebody else would be a better fit for you. Plain and simple. And I will say for me, all the clients I fired over the years, I don't ever get a response and then they just leave me alone. So it works really well. I think they probably know it. Right? They're probably feeling it already. Or if they're, one of those people that just constantly is always hopping to service provider and trying to get deals or trying to get things for free or whatever, you obviously aren't going to work anymore for them. So they're going to move on. But I will say get more comfortable firing clients, get more comfortable with your policies in place and sticking to your policies in place, because this is the times where those policies are going to really make a difference. So I hope all of those things help you guys put policies in place so you can avoid chargebacks and disputes and be communicating with your clients really effectively before your appointments, and you'll avoid a lot of these things. Thank you for listening. I hope you liked that episode and found something useful or a tip that you can use immediately. If you are wanting more marketing tips, business tips, or anything like that, I have a lot of resources on my website. So I have PDFs that you can download for free. So look in your show notes. There should be a link in the show notes that you can click on, and it'll take you right to my coaching website. And thanks for listening.